CMCSS study session, and also welcome Dr. Jean Luna Vetter. Glad to have you here for the first meeting, and won't be the last. Last meeting to be here. Okay, first item, public participation. I think we have 3 speakers tonight, and I don't have the list of the first speaker. You gonna put that up for me? Guess I could look at my email. While we're waiting, the board will not allow profane language, threats, loud comments, or excessive noise from the floor. Disruptive persons will be asked to leave the meeting room. In accordance with Tennessee Code annotated in 39-17-306, any person who acts to prevent, obstruct, or interfere with any lawful meeting of the CMCSS school board, physical action or verbal utterance shall be warned by the chair, vice chair, or board attorney to discontinue those actions. Law enforcement may lawfully remove any person from the meeting who refuses to cease his or her acts of preventing, obstructing, or interfering with any such meetings. And I'm sure we'll have a problem there. So, our first speaker is Ms. Ledbetter. Jasmine Ledbetter. Okay, if she does come in before the other speakers finish, we'll let them speak. Jason Riggs.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jason Rivas. I'm in JHR Photography, local photographer here in town. What I wanted to address with you tonight is the photography contract with the school district as it pertains to sports photography and the banners. My company and CME and a couple others have been sponsors of the school programs, the athletics and the activities, football, basketball, volleyball for a number of years. And the way that the contract was either disseminated to the district, to the coaches in the booster club, and then out to the parents from there, indicates some things that I don't believe are correct. On the first page of the information that came from the contracted photographer, it highlighted that only the contracted photographer can take pictures and display any images at the sporting events, so the banners and things like that. The exact language says that if they used anybody else, it would be a breach of contract and they would be subject to monetary fines. I'm not sure who would fine parents and booster clubs as they're not contracted with the district at all. On top of that, myself and Ms. Mongol with CME, we are not hired to do this. We are sponsors. We come in and we provide a service to the teams to get them social media content, marketing materials. The banners are part of it. But this is more to increase exposure for the programs, for the recruiting and participation in the sports. This is a service that goes way beyond what the district contract and their compensation package and the commission that's paid. We individually give more to the teams than the entire commission that's paid back to the school. So when we value out what we provide in the banners, in the photography, in the social media, the video, that goes with it, that one contribution to each team outpaces what is in that contract. So the way that it was communicated was a little bit disheartening to us because it specifically blocks out media sponsors. Additionally, there was a lot of confusion with the coaches and the booster clubs talking to us who we have relationships with, thinking that they can't use us for their media. Last year, if you talked with the coaches and had any of them present this information to you, the contracted photographer was not able to even photograph the underclassmen or the bulk of the team to get them in the yearbook. We're not asking to be yearbook photographers. That isn't what we do. We sponsor the programs. The way that the contract was communicated said that it had to be any banners or anything presented at the field had to go through the contract photographer. I would like to have that addressed directly. As a sponsor, just like all the other sponsors out there on the field, they get to put their signs up. Our signs are banners. That's the marketing and that's the sponsorship trade-off, besides what we give back to the teams directly. By blocking, or the way that it was delivered, the contract or the communication of the contract essentially targets only media companies as sponsors, and only really 3 companies in particular to block us out of sponsoring the teams. So that's what I wanted to bring to your attention. I think it's in the best interest of the kids to have a marketing presence in their sports and in their activities, get them exposure, to get them participation, to recruit. For a lot of those kids, this is the only opportunity they'll get to look at scouts for their scholarships, for potential to go on to college. That isn't written into the school's photography contract. That isn't what they provide. It's not what they're there for. That's what we're there for, to be sponsors of those programs. So appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Shawnee Bledsoe.
Hi.
Hey.
Welcome, Dr. Vader. We're excited about you being part of the team, and we're just super happy to have you. I just want to take a quick second and talk to you all about the 7 to 10 point grading system. As everybody knows, that's been adjusted recently, that legislation has changed so that the 7 to 10 point system can impact all incoming freshmen. That legislation, after doing a lot of recon and having conversations with Dr. Imperchus and other people within the district, that legislation was originally intended to be retroactivated for all kids who were enrolled through high school during the time that was implemented. Somehow that got changed, and it only impacts incoming freshmen. After doing some recon and having conversations with other board members, I have been told that the best course of action is to come to you all and request the board draft a letter to the state requesting that be implemented retroactively. And here is why. When you look at what happened over the course of the last few years with COVID, the ones that were hit the hardest and that will have the longest lasting impact are the ones that are juniors and seniors this year, because they were freshmen and sophomores at that time. They have not been given much of an opportunity to try to academically catch up, which is why that implementation can be so incredibly impactful for those students. Kids who are currently showing that they're failing classes, that can change that for those kids. Kids who were potentially in line for scholarships that lost out by just a hair, or opportunities like my son who came and presented and was cut off and unable to enter into the program for middle college. That would impact those students. Unfortunately, it's too late for him, but there are other kids that could potentially impact. Those kids went through a lot, and we can help them with that. I did a lot of research into what that would look like, as far as if that's something that could be done. It's as simple as ones and zeros. I talked to a couple of different people who have been utilizing PowerSchool for decades, and they said this is very simple. It just requires that you're very specific about what you ask for, because once you make that change is in. However, it's fairly simple to implement. Our district has already been using a 10-point transcript because of transfer, and so that's not a problem. It's already fixed. All we have to do is retroactivate PowerSchool so that they get one grading system instead of 2 for those kids who are going out as juniors and seniors and sophomores this year. I mean, honestly, we get that there are going to be things that are going to be difficult, but those kids went through a very difficult time. I know some of you are running for re-election. If you would like to really show these kids that you genuinely care about their college and career preparedness, this is a very simple fix to implement. It costs nothing, but it will give them potential opportunity that is huge. All you have to do is write a letter. That's it. That's all we're asking. If you guys could please do that for the kids at CMCSS, that would be great. Thanks.
Thank you. Item 2, charter recommendation. Dr. Lynn.
Absolutely, board. We have an employee here. We have Elizabeth Vincent, who's Director of Continuous Improvement. As you know, she has been part of the Charter Review Committee, and she is here to present with us this evening the recommendations based upon the amended charter applications.
Good evening, board members. It's really nice to see you all again, and thank you so much for some of your time so we can share these recommendations based on the amended applications that we received from 2 charter applicants that applied to open charter schools in our district in February. We received those applications in the month of May, and so want to prepare and share with you those recommendations from the Charter Review Committee. I want to spend just a few quick moments going through some of the expectations at the state level that are placed before charter authorizers. That is the role that we serve in CMCSS when we receive applications to open charter schools, or if eventually a charter school is approved. CMCSS serves as the authorizer in that capacity. I've been through this with you all once before. These are some expectations that I shared in our initial application review, so I won't spend a ton of time going through them with great detail, but did want to just bring these things back to you as a reminder of what those state expectations are. And so the first thing I want to share are the quality authorizing principles that are in state board policy. And the first principle is to maintain high standards. The second principle is to uphold school autonomy. And then the third principle is to protect student and public interests. So at all point in the process of navigating charter application review, if there's a charter application approved, the process of authorizing, these principles really ground the work that we do as a district, that you do as a board, maintaining high standards, upholding school autonomy, and protecting student and public interests. Additionally, there are quality authorizing standards that are laid out in state board policy, in addition to those principles. And so a few of the standards of a quality authorizer are to, 1, consider the diverse educational philosophies and approaches that may be offered by potential applicants. 2, requiring applicants to demonstrate capacity to serve students with diverse needs, whether that be students with disabilities, students from low-income backgrounds, or all ranges of diverse needs that students may have in a school system that ultimately could enroll in a charter school. Implementing a charter application process that is open, well-publicized, and transparent, organized around clear, realistic timelines. We have strived both in our initial application process as well as this amended process to be as open and clear with our charter applicants as possible about our expectations, about timelines, and to provide them with as much ability as possible to meet those things in a realistic way. Finally, requiring all applicants to present, and I won't go through this list just bullet by bullet because again, I have been through these things with you before, but just for you to reflect on that bulleted list and as a reminder that these are really the areas that as a review committee, we took very seriously in engaging with our charter review process. What is the mission? What is the vision of this school? What is their budget? Is it solvent and sustainable? Do they have contingency plans? These are all things that were very much at the front of the minds of the review committee members and are set as expectations in state law. A quality authorizer is expected to only grant charters to applicants who demonstrate a capacity for success in all aspects of their school model. That's a very weighty responsibility that's placed on charter authorizers. They will rigorously evaluate each application and each of those component parts to assess the capacity to prepare, the capacity to serve students in all aspects of their model. And then finally, engaging highly competent teams of internal and external reviewers that have experience in management, financial areas, legal expertise, government, nonprofit management. There are a whole host of different types of experience that are expected to be part of that review committee and in that review committee process. And so that was another expectation set in state law that dictated the makeup of the review committee that we had for this process. Sure, absolutely.
You say, and at the bottom of it, it says principles of charter school autonomy and accountability. What about public school?
Charter schools are public schools. They receive public funds. And in state law, these are the dictates of state law, and that's what I'm going over right now. So the information that I'm presenting is how they are laid out in state law, which is how that's specified. I want to share a little bit about the review process and what that has looked like. On April 22nd, we communicated with the 2 charter applicants what the board's decision was regarding their initial applications. And May 23rd was the deadline by which they could submit their amended applications. Both applicants did submit their applications on May 23rd. we held 3 different review committee meetings over the course of the month of June, one on June 2nd, one on June 15th, and one on June 23rd. We engaged in a process of reviewing the applications initially, very similar to the way that we did the first review. However, we also at these meetings spent time working together in groups on different portions of that application to take advantage of expertise that we had in the group and assess those applications and their amendments as quickly as possible and come to a group consensus about what the recommendation might be to you all. This is July 5th. I am presenting that recommendation to you now, and July 19th is the time at which you were scheduled to take a vote on these 2 amended applications. As far as just an overview of the review process and how that's laid out in state law, we as a district, as a review committee, had 60 days to review these applications and make a recommendation, and ultimately that for you all to take a vote once those amended applications are received. As I indicated earlier, we undertook this as an individual review process, but ultimately did come to a group consensus. So the recommendations that I'm sharing with you all tonight are the views of the review committee as a whole. We reviewed the entire application. However, we placed special emphasis on any changes that were submitted at this point in time. Any areas of the application where there were not significant changes, we didn't focus on those portions as heavily because we had already reviewed those parts of the application. So we really placed a special emphasis on comparing the 2 applications and ensuring that we could evaluate the changes that had been made in the amended versions. We use the Tennessee Department of Education's rubric for evaluating charter applications. There are 3 different ratings that charter school applicants can receive under that rubric. Either meets the standard, meets or exceeds the standard, partially meets the standard, or does not meet the standard. And as a reminder, all summary ratings must be at meets or exceeds the standard in order to recommend approval of a charter application. And so with that, I want to go through the summary ratings of our 2 applicants, and I think I may have skipped a slide, yes. Before I go into that, I do want to share just a brief overview before each of these sections of what is included in those sections. The first section is academic design and capacity. It assesses all of the different academic plans of a charter applicant, their school calendar, all sorts of things of that nature that relate to the academics of the school. One of our applicants, you may remember, was American Classical Academy Montgomery. They proposed opening a classical charter school in the Clarksville-Montgomery County school system. And for academic design and capacity, the applicant met the standard according to the criteria set out in the Tennessee Department of Education's rubric. Ultimately, upon reviewing that amended application, there were several strengths that were included in the application. First and foremost, the applicant made some updates to their curricular sections as well as their assessment sections to show more clearly how their materials and how their academic plans would align with the Tennessee academic standards. That was a major concern upon initial review of the application, was whether that alignment was present, and we got a clearer sense that it was present after that amended review. The applicant also made significant adjustments to their special populations plans and addressed several concerns that review committee members had, both with just their plans overall as well as the verbiage in some of their handbooks for parents, families, and students. And so there were several changes made that the review committee felt alleviated those concerns. There were also more metrics provided to show how they would measure the success of their mission and vision as a school. There were several aspects of their mission that are difficult to measure, such as changing the hearts and minds of students, and the review committee wanted to have a better sense of what that vision would look like for the school and how they would measure it, and they provided some of those metrics in the amended application. Finally, they demonstrated a broader range of community support in their amended application than they did in their initial application, which alleviated another concern of the review committee. Throughout my presentation and the thoughts of the review committee and what I'm sharing with you all, we as a review committee wanted to provide as much information to you all as possible and to be as transparent with you all as possible about the conversations and the decisions that we ultimately are recommending to you. And so because of that, even when we say that an applicant has met the standard, we do still want to be sure that we highlight some remaining concerns that review committee members had so that you have that full range of information to help you in your decision making ultimately. And so a few remaining concerns with this particular section of American Classical Academy's application. They provided more data to show the academic success of their model. However, ultimately, it still does not demonstrate the capacity for success of the classical model. They still provided data to the review committee in their application in the aggregate. They provided performance of their schools overall, compared to a district overall, or compared with a state overall. And we didn't have any information about the demographics of those schools, how they compared to the demographics of the district, how they compared to the demographics of the state. So we couldn't really fairly assess the validity of whether that classical model education was really the source of those academic achievements. There are also still some concerns from the review committee about the alignment of the RTI practices with this applicant to the Tennessee Department of Education framework. Specifically in the way that they schedule intervention opportunities for students, we're still unsure if that actually aligns to what the Department of Education expects of districts in implementing RTI practices. Section 2 encompasses governance structures, startup plans, facilities plans, and operational components and things of that nature. For Section 2, the applicant partially met the standard in this area. A few of the strengths that the applicant brought in their amended application, there are several changes that we appreciated, which included adding some Tennessee board members to their board. They were not necessarily local to Clarksville, but they were local to Tennessee. They also developed a relationship with a local realtor to aid in their facilities acquisition process, which was a welcome change. There were also some changes to their plans to seek waivers, specifically around teacher licensure requirements. That was an especially concerning waiver that the applicant requested in their initial application, and they updated that plan. They removed that waiver. Finally, they made some progress on their additional operations section of the application, specifically in indicating that they had a contract or an MOU with a technology partner that could help support some of their tech support and things of that nature. They don't plan to use technology in a great degree, but we were appreciative of seeing that opportunity where they had some support with their technology plans. Ultimately, there were several remaining concerns with this particular section of the application, especially among the facilities portion of the application. The applicant did not demonstrate concrete contingency facilities plans. Basically, the applicant indicated in their amendments that there are several partnerships and MOUs in place, but could not provide a lot of progress on obtaining a facility since their initial application. There were several indications in the application that investigations are occurring, that the search is ongoing, but there were no clear concrete suggestions offered or areas that they're considering at this point. The only concrete location that they offered as a contingency was the same one they provided upon initial application review, and our review committee continues to feel that that is not a suitable educational facility for them. They don't highlight any other possible locations at this point or types of locations that they've investigated, only that those investigations are ongoing. And ultimately, their main contingency is to plan to delay opening for a year in the event that they cannot find a facility. And it's the position of the review committee that that burden ultimately falls on the student who has to change school plans in the event that the charter can't open because they can't find a facility. And we don't feel that contingency is sufficient. A few remaining concerns in this section in addition to the facilities portions. There was insufficient evidence of a safety and security plan offered by the applicant. They indicated they'll develop a safety and security plan, but there was no indication in the amended application when that would occur. There were also insufficient health plans. They indicate that they will align to coordinated school health expectations. However, there was not much more insight around their plans to ensure a healthy learning environment for students outside of just saying that they will align to those expectations. And then finally, there was insufficient evidence of their waivers necessity and their relationship with improved student outcomes. If you'll remember, this was another major concern of the review committee upon initially reviewing their application was there were a large number of waivers requested, and there was not a clear connection to how those waivers would improve student achievement. To the applicant's credit, they did attempt to provide some additional explanation as to why their waivers were necessary for them to carry out their mission and their vision, But ultimately, because I'm gonna show an example just to provide a little bit of insight as to what some of those waiver explanations look like. Essentially, the applicant indicated that the waivers they needed would allow them to more successfully implement the classical model to a high degree. But because in section 1, there was not a clear explanation or clear evidence of the tie between the success of that model and improved student outcomes, this evidence of why these waivers were necessary was non-compelling for that reason. We couldn't see a clear connection between implementing the classical model and improved student outcomes, so the waivers were not necessarily compelling. The final section of the application that we reviewed is the financial plan and capacity. One main section here, just charter school financing. They submit a budget narrative, and assumptions, and ultimately, American Classical Academy Montgomery meets the standard in this area based on the Department of Education's rubrics. Ultimately, they provided additional letters of assurance from some partners that assured the review committee that they had the financial backing that they needed in the event they needed to shift their financial plans or make adjustments. And so our earlier concerns upon reviewing the application were alleviated in the amended version. However, again, I do want to highlight remaining concerns in full transparency. The review committee felt that the applicant could have made some more adjustments to their budget based on the feedback that we shared with them in the initial application review, and it didn't appear that there were great changes made based on that review committee feedback when we reviewed the amended application. And ultimately, we do still feel that the budget is perhaps too conservative. It is aggressively conservative, which we certainly appreciate, but the review committee still did have some concerns that, you know, while the budget worked out well and on paper, it worked out well on paper and they seem to have the financial backing, it could be that there are some contingencies that ultimately end up making it difficult to operate on that budget. And so to summarize, for American Classical Academy Montgomery, for section 1, the applicant meets the standard. For section 2, they partially meet the standard. And then for section 3, they meet the standard. And with that, I'm going to move on to our next applicant, which is Oxton Academy Charter High School. For academic design and capacity, Oxton Academy Charter High School, which you may remember, this is an applicant that proposes to open a high school specifically for students that will target students who may be at risk of dropping out, who otherwise, for whatever reason, are not successful in a traditional school model, and partnering with industries to offer students opportunities to catch up on coursework, as well as work opportunities for them to gain some work experience in addition to completing a high school diploma. As far as their academic design and capacity, Oxton Academy Charter High School meets the standard according to the Department of Education's rubric. A lot of strengths, particularly in the academic section for Oxton Academy. The applicant has an admirable, compelling, and measurable mission and vision that's really centered on working with at-risk students that the review committee appreciated. They also provided some additional materials to show alignment of their curricular materials and their assessment materials to Tennessee academic standards, a concern that we had with the earlier application that was alleviated in this review. Additionally, they provided explanations around their enrollment projections that were somewhat concerning to the review committee on first review, that alleviated a lot of those earlier concerns. So it seemed that there was just a little bit of miscommunication in the way that they reported some of their enrollment projections and the way that we were interpreting those figures. And so they were able to clear that up in the amended application, and that alleviated some of our concerns. Ultimately, with the academic section from this particular applicant, there were not a lot of remaining concerns. Whatever concerns we did have were alleviated through the amended process. And as I indicated, the review committee felt that the mission and vision of this particular charter applicant and some of their plans were admirable and appreciated. For operations plan and capacity, the review committee felt that this applicant meets the standard according to the rubric from the Department of Education. The applicant made several helpful updates to their human capital plans that will make it more feasible for them to recruit the employees that they need. There are particular few advantages for them to recruit CTE teachers, which is going to be critical to their success and something that they potentially could have had a challenge with based on their earlier application. They also added information that provided a level of concreteness to their facilities contingencies, that will allow them to be realistic for the population that they hope to serve and the model that they hope to execute, and they can be executed quickly. So some updates to their facilities plans allowed for their plans to be more concrete than they were upon first read. They also made some updates to their line items in their startup budget to allocate more funding toward possible renovations if needed, based on feedback from the review committee. And then finally, they added an extensive safety plan that is built entirely based on the Tennessee Department of Education's school safety plan rubric, and that was an omission in their earlier application, and we appreciated that follow-up. On top of a few other things they were able to add to their operations plans that build them out a little bit more. A few remaining concerns that we do have, though this applicant meets the standard, mainly center on human capital plans and the need for the applicant to request some waivers. Essentially, the applicant still needs to pursue waivers for some things that they hope to do, like considering their employees at will, their certified employees at will, with 75-day probationary periods. That practice will require waivers of things like evaluation contracts, termination of contracts laws, tenure laws, and the applicant, in their amended application, didn't indicate they plan to pursue any of those waivers. And so that is something, in the event that the applicant were approved, would need to be something that is addressed. They also do not indicate if they plan to participate in the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System, which is something they would also need to request a waiver for. In pursuing the one waiver that they did indicate they might request, which was a waiver to use a Florida evaluation system for their employees rather than the team rubric, the applicant did not provide compelling evidence or clarity as to why that particular evaluation system was necessary. The review committee ultimately wanted to see more information about how that rubric would help them improve student outcomes over use of the team rubric to evaluate their employees. Finally, section 3 for financial plan for Auxton Academy Charter High School, the applicant meets the standard. The applicant, both through their interview in the early application process, as well as their amended application, were able to communicate access to additional capital, that assures that they have additional financial backing in the event that they need to for financial contingencies. And ultimately, if the applicant is forced to make adjustment to their budget, it's the position of the review committee that those things can happen and have to happen in order for the organization to be viable. The review committee would hope that if approved, the applicant would be willing to potentially make further adjustments to their budget and just think that much more on ways they can do so sustainably and really push for a solvent and viable budget. Again, just as I indicated earlier, ultimately the applicant is operating on a very conservative budget, similar to our other applicant. They are both operating on very conservative budgets. And the review committee just wants to reiterate that they need to operate with immense fiscal scrutiny over the course of their opening year and their planning year to ensure that they're viable and sustainable. And so with that, a summary for Auxton Academy Charter High School. Section 1, the applicant meets the standard. Section 2, the applicant meets the standard. And Section 3, the applicant meets the standard. And so the recommendation of the review committee at this time is to deny American Classical Academy Montgomery and to approve Auxton Academy Charter High School. And before I move on, I want to just add one more thing in the spirit of transparency. Being part of this review committee process, this was not an easy decision for the review committee. It's one that we spent a significant amount of time and thought and energy really weighing all of the options that were put before us. And as I started with this presentation, I hope that the recommendation does not in any way lead you all to think that there are not strengths and flaws in both of these applications. There are many strengths, and there are still things that we believe may need to be addressed. But ultimately, we did our very best as a review committee to honor the expectations in the rubric presented by the Department of Education, and to really ask ourselves as a review committee, what do we feel is in the best interest of students? And so I just wanted to kind of end the recommendation on that note to just emphasize the work of this review committee and how dedicated everyone on the committee was to making the best decision possible for the students of this system and for this community. And so with that, just a few next steps Ultimately, the decision will be up to you all, whether to accept the recommendations that the review committee has made or not. Tuesday, July 19th is the point at which you all are scheduled for a vote on these decisions. If the vote is to approve either or both of these applications, CMCSS will become the authorizer and will enter into the process of creating an authorization agreement with either or both of these charter applicants. If the decision is to deny either or both of these applicants, then they will have 10 days at that point to submit an appeal directly to the Tennessee Charter School Commission. In full transparency, I have not received training at this point on the appeal process and exactly what that looks like. So I can't answer very many specific questions as to what that appeal process entails, but as we continue to learn more and receive more training from the Department of Education, should that process be something that we end up experiencing, we'll certainly be happy to answer any additional questions at that point on what that looks like. I want to just remind both you all as well as the public that are listening in tonight of some of the resources that we have available. The public is welcome. The public is welcome to consult these applications. We have both the original application and the amended applications for both applicants on our website. There are also audio recordings of the capacity interviews that we conducted with applicants back in March. So all of those materials are accessible on our website for anyone to view should they so choose. Additionally, we have 2 active surveys for both of these applicants, and we welcome any feedback from community members on the applications, specifically the amended applications that we received at this point in time. And so all of that can be found at the link that you see up there, cmcss.net/schoolboard/charter schools. And with that, I will be glad to answer whatever questions I can answer at this point.
Yes, I recognize Dr. Vicki Wallace as being on one of your committee members. Is there anyone else out there that's on the charter committee?
There are, yes, I know, I see that Dana Payne put her hand up back there. The committee encompassed our executive cabinet as well as some other key members of the senior leadership team that they had specific expertise they could offer based on the applications that we received. And we also had a few external committee members, of which Ms. Vicki Wallace was one.
Okay, and my next question is, are you familiar with the interview that Governor Lee and the charter representative and or member recently? What relationship is he, not Governor Lee, the charter member, to either one of these, if any at all?
That's a great question. Yeah, I am familiar with the interview that you've described.
Because we had the dumbest teachers and the people that instructed these teachers were very dumb also, the way I read into it.
I am familiar, yes. It was a really unfortunate series of comments that the president of Hillsdale College made. And personally, as someone who was a teacher myself, certainly felt disturbed and shocked and saddened by those comments. Regarding your question about the relationship, American Classical Academy Montgomery, that is one of our charter school applicants, they are applying as an affiliate of a charter school network that is connected with the university that individual is a president of, if that makes sense. So the university is Hillsdale College. They have established a network of charter schools that operate in different states across the country. Their leadership and presidents are not the same as that particular president. They have different principals and leaders and different groups like that. But they are affiliated with that university as public schools. So that's the relationship, and as a reminder, American Classical Academy Montgomery is ultimately the application that the review committee is recommending denial for, and Oxton Academy Charter High School is a totally separate entity, not related to that school.
Thank you.
I have a question. If we were to approve either one of these applicants in regards to the waivers that they would need to apply for, what happens if they apply for those waivers and they get denied for those waivers?
That is one of those questions that unfortunately I am not totally sure about. It is certainly Carol Joyner that is our general counsel. She and I have been working together a lot on this process, and we will go through that training together along with Dr. Huff to determine those next steps and ask some of those questions about what the authorization process looks like in the event that they're approved and how that happens exactly.
And so, follow up to that, you may not know that either, how soon would they know back on those waivers, do we know that, or?
I'm not sure about that either,
Okay.
unfortunately not.
Okay, thank you.
We expect to receive training sometime this month, so hopefully we will have those answers for you very soon in the event that they're needed.
Yeah, my question would be, if, they can't come up with the funds, at what point will the community be responsible for them?
My understanding of the way that the process is supposed to work, the community would not be responsible insofar as the charter school is responsible for any remaining funding or anything like that. That is their responsibility in the event that the charter is ultimately not viable and not successful. Of course, you know, there may potentially be a burden if a student has enrolled in the school and is ultimately not successful, that it would fall to the district to re-enroll those students and re-accommodate those students, which of course we would certainly work to do. But as far as any kind of financial burden, my understanding is that charter schools are responsible for those costs if they are ultimately not successful.
This is not a charter school, this is a public charter school.
A charter school is a public school.
But my understanding of a public charter school is that it's a private school that wants to be operated using local and state funds.
That's not the case. In Tennessee specifically, that's not how charter schools operate as 501c3, so they're nonprofit entities. And so they operate as nonprofit public entities in Tennessee.
Okay, I don't know why TSBA told me something totally different from what you're telling me.
I can't speak to that. This is again based on the training that I've received as we've gone through the process of charter authorizing, and I can't speak to what TSBA may have shared.
Hopefully, once you go through that training, that we'll be on the same page. Thank you.
All righty, thank you. If there's no other questions, I want to point out while their county commissioner, education committee's not here tonight, is they're having their own meeting due to the holiday yesterday. Dr. Linda, is that item number 3?
Yes, I believe we have Tina Smith here, the Director of Professional Development, to give us an update. Director of Professional Learning, to give us an update on what's going on in professional development in CMCSS.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here tonight and share some updates from professional learning and what we've done for the past year. It is definitely summertime outside, right? Grateful for the air conditioning inside so we can be comfortable tonight. But at the end of the school year, as summer approaches, is when we start collecting our data and looking at our final numbers for the year. So I have a few numbers that I want to start off sharing with you tonight. So when we look back over the 21-22 school year, we had 2,044 sections that were offered. So that's classes. Those are professional learning events that our educators could take part in throughout the year. So quite a few learning opportunities out there. Those learning opportunities would equal out to a little over 5,000 hours of in-service that educators could earn, and things that cannot count as in-service. There are certain restrictions for what can count as in-service and what cannot. Anything else would then be training credit. So there was over 2,000 hours of training credit that was out there and available to educators as well. So I always like to share kind of where our numbers fall out for the year. Oh, and by the way, that picture there on the right is our principal at Kenwood and one of the educators that we were celebrating there for earning a micro-credential as part of her professional learning journey this past year. So our totals, when we're just looking at our certified educators for the 21-22 school year, they earned over 90,000 hours of in-service this year, and they earned over 68,000 hours of training. Now, if you remember back to when I presented to you this time last year, I combined those numbers and shared it to you as one total. I'm sure you remember that exactly right. It was a long time ago. I have a hard time remembering yesterday. Last year, we sat at a total of 114,000 hours that our certified educators earned. So if you're quickly doing the math in your head, you can see that they far exceeded that number this year, and we're at over 158,000 hours. that they earned this year. So while I was so impressed with the learning that teachers did last year, they by far are not sitting back resting and are still working so hard to learn everything that they need to do to be ready to meet the diverse needs of their students. So 158,000 hours this year alone. Now, all of that learning wouldn't mean anything if it wasn't worthwhile learning. So of course, we're gonna look at our survey data as well and see how that learning is hitting home for our educators. So a couple of points that I pulled out from our initial survey that we give after every learning opportunity. The first one that you'll see, 95% of our educators said that the learning either met or exceeded their expectations, so they're getting the learning that they want. And then the second part of that, 96% of them agree that they're gonna be able to in turn use that in their classroom to enhance key areas of their professional practice. So not only was it hitting the need that they had, but then they can apply that learning in their classrooms, which is exactly what we want to see. So the learning is worthwhile, but I don't just want to share numbers with you. I want to share some actual examples real quick. So I have just a couple of things that I want to highlight for you this evening. The first one comes from a tool that our technology integration coaches have taught teachers how to use. We really have had to get creative in the last few years at making learning accessible to our students. So one of the tools that we have taught teachers how to use, you can see highlighted in this video over on the right-hand side. So there's no, there is audio on this, but we're gonna turn that audio off so it's not distracting to you, because the point is not about the audio and what she's talking users through, but it's just to see what this tool is like.
You'll see the start button.
So we may have to ignore that noise in the background for a little bit, but this is a very brief video that is showing something that the technology integration coaches created to help our criminal justice teachers. So they came with a problem and said, hey, we really need our students to better be able to see how evidence is collected and how it's processed. Can you help us come up with a more creative way, a better way to help students experience that? And we just happened to have a connection at the TBI. I'm sorry, is that really distracting to y'all? Okay, not too bad. So you can see in the video on the right, all of these little numbers are showing each of the different units inside of the TBI. So if our kids were lucky enough to go on a field trip, they wouldn't get exposure to a lot of the things that they allowed us to capture in this learning tool that was created. So the students could go to each one of the different units, learn about the evidence that's collected, how it's processed, and the tools that are used to do that. So a very rich learning tool for our students to learn about that evidence. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting that we learned along the way, for the small team that was sent, they can call us back, they've seen enough.
Each laboratory you'll be visiting.
One of the things that they discovered as they were creating this tool, as they were interviewing some of these special agents, some of them had a connection to CMCSS. They were former students, or they were Austin Peay graduates. And so in making these videos where they're talking through their roles and what they do and the equipment that they use, they also talked about their educational background, their experiences that got them to that position. So then we can use this tool in a whole nother way for college and career readiness as well. So it's just one example of something that was created to help teachers meet a need, but as the coaches were teaching this tool to others, then our teachers take on these tools. Can you help me advance, please? There we go. So now our kindergarten teachers from Burns-Darton took this same tool and made an immersive experience for one of their unit texts that they knew their students were going to struggle understanding. They knew they weren't going to have the background for it, and they weren't going to be able to comprehend this text fully. So, for example, the text was talking about different technologies throughout history, and this example shows a picture of a kitchen, and it talked about the fact that there was no running water and no electricity. But this one little image wasn't going to be enough to drive that home to students and have them fully understand, and so they were able to use this text and add additional pictures and wording and videos so that they could see an ice box and go through a video of exactly how that works. They could see a worker bringing this big block of ice to cool down that ice box and what that meant. They could see how you brought water into the house and what you did with it after you were finished, and all of those different things. So really turned this into an interactive experience that the students could use to better comprehend that text. So I thought that was just a fun example of how they took that learning. And so since I'm talking about technology, there was one other piece that I wanted to highlight for you tonight. When we were getting to the close of the first semester, we knew the teachers needed a little bit of learning. And so we wanted to offer them a quick one-day conference with some additional learning that they could do. But the learning was going to be online. We wanted to make it easy. It was going to be a Saturday so they could access it. But then we decided that we also, since it was going to be online, it's easy for anybody else to hop on. So we wanted to open it up to teachers in the region around us so that we could collaborate and get some fresh ideas from others as well. So when teachers shared, when the tech coaches shared this conference out on their social networks, it was so interesting that we ended up being able to collaborate with educators, not just from our region, but we had participants from across the United States and across the globe. We had some teachers join us from California. We had some teachers join us from the Virgin Islands, from the United Kingdom. So it was such a great opportunity for our teachers to be able to collaborate with others from not just right here that they're used to talking to every day. So it was definitely an interesting experience for us. So I've talked a lot about certified employees and the learning that we have offered them. I want to talk a little bit about our classified employees, because we have been wanting for years to give more professional learning opportunities to our classified employees, because we know to be the best organization that all of our employees need to continue to learn and grow so that they can best meet the needs of students. So we are so grateful that through the use of some of our ESSER funds, we have been able to add Dr. Jamie Holder to our team, and she has been coordinating specific learning for a lot of our classified employee groups. And you can see the groups that are first targeted listed here on the screen. So we have had professional learning opportunities this summer for our educational and our media assistants, our administrative and office assistants, our accounting technicians, and our bus drivers. One of the reasons our classified learning has been such a barrier to us in the past is that in the summer, when we do so much of our professional learning, they're off calendar. So we need to have some way to compensate them if they're going to come in and work and learn on those days. And there's usually just not funding available for that. Or if we do it during the school day, we have to pull them away from their students, and we can't afford to do that. They need to be with the students. And so this ESSER funding has allowed us to offer them $20 an hour to come in and get this professional learning. And these groups are coming in to get up to 12 hours of professional learning this summer. And we will hope to replicate this again next summer as well. So it's been a phenomenal addition of offerings for us. We're going to work to provide them learning on staff development days throughout the school year. The summer learning is ongoing now. It started in June, and we have more summer learning coming in July for them. Their sessions have been both online and in person. We wanted to give them a variety of options. And since online, there may be difficulty for people to access it, we've opened a computer lab one day a week so that they could come in. We could help them through any issues and walk them through some things. But we wanted to offer some online learning because it's allowing them to dig deeper into the content, and they're really learning to apply that learning right then. As a part of the online learning, they're developing plans of how they're going to use that learning, and they're submitting those plans before they receive credit for the class. So Dr. Holder is actually going over all of the submissions and giving them feedback, even sending out information to some of their supervisors when she sees some amazing results sent back to her. And so it's just been a great learning opportunity for them that we're so excited to continue doing. They've already earned over 4,000 hours just in the month of June, and we're really looking forward to July. So I definitely can't mention summer learning without talking about our Summer Engage conference. So we were beyond excited to return to an in-person conference again this summer. It's been 2 years since we've been able to have an in-person conference, and you just can't match the synergy when all of the teachers gather together in the same place and are learning together in the room. So we are beyond excited that we were able to come together the first week in June and have a week of strong professional learning in June. And then we're gonna come together again in July in a couple of weeks. In June, we were at West Creek High School. July, we're gonna be at Kenwood High School, doing our summer learning together. We did keep a little bit of a hybrid model. So the Monday of the week, we're offering virtual sessions on that day that are live sessions. And then Tuesday through Thursday are our in-person sessions at the high school. We did also keep a handful of online classes that are self-paced, and the reason for that is so that we could offer some simple things that everybody needs access to. So like some curriculum updates that every teacher needs to hear, but it takes a lot of time to teach that information to large groups of teachers. And so when they can dig into that in a self-paced online format that they can go back to at any time, that frees us up for our in-person learning to be deeper, different learning instead. So we did keep a handful of those. So for our engaged summer sessions, we've had 770 sessions. Well, I say had, we had part of those in June and we're doing the other part in a couple of weeks in July. The vast majority of them are in person, with a handful of live virtual sessions on Mondays and those online self-paced courses that I was just mentioning. But what I'm most excited about Engage for this year is the fact that our classified employees for the very first time have been able to join us for that Engage conference learning. So we had 51 sessions for our classified employees, the same groups that I mentioned and showed you earlier, with a wide range of offerings. So they've learned a lot about building relationships with students. They've had behavior management and SEL courses. They've had technology courses. They've had courses around core instruction. One of the ones that I visited in June, Ashley Forbes, our ELA 3-5 consulting teacher, was teaching a course to educational assistants where she was really digging into some early literacy strategies and helping them understand interventions better and what that looks like in the classroom. And they were so fully engaged with her, asking the best questions. And it was just such wonderful learning to see taking place. There was learning around special populations. It makes me think about a training for our bus drivers where we dug deeper into IEPs and 504 plans, and so they could really fully understand what those mean and how that impacts managing behavior on their buses. We partnered with HR for an employee well-being course because we've learned over the past few years, if we didn't already know, that we do need to take care of ourselves. And so to learn how to better take care of yourselves and the resources that are out there available. We've had sessions on teamwork and communications. Some of our administrative assistants have had some great connections there that I actually want to share some feedback with you in just a second. So that's actually where I want to go next and highlight just a few feedback items so you can hear a sense from some of those classified employees and the learning that they have received. So highlights of just being grateful for the training and knowing that it's going to help them improve in their jobs. Feedback about improving in their own skills and knowing how to better use those with others. Feedback about knowing better how to work with students with autism. Knowing that we had tools, but learning that that tool is so much more than an assessment piece that they originally thought, and how they can use that tool to figure out exactly what students' needs and how to help them better in small situations. Learning better how to work and connect with our students. I love the little quote here at the end, in a world that is ever changing, we can be their constant. So helping them get that foundation to truly be able to build relationships and understand the students that they are working with. A couple of last comments from their feedback. This one comes from someone that doesn't deliver instruction to students, but this was one of those front office examples. I'm going to take a second and actually read this one to you because I think it's great. I love that this course gives specific examples to establish positive relationships with both students and parents, and how to restore those relationships that may need attention. In the front office, we're often the first face students see when they get to school. It's imperative that we help set the tone for the day, let students know they're loved, and build relationships with them so they are best equipped for learning. I plan to continue to show love to students by calling them by name, knowing who they are, and taking interest in their lives. and reminding them that we care for them no matter what. And then finally, this is one from an educational assistant that took a course on questioning and felt really confident walking into the course, but throughout the course realized that, wow, I still have room to grow in my questioning and how much better and more effective I can help students learn in the course of these lessons by just making this minor adjustment. So within this course, they had to select a standard and a lesson that is usually taught in a classroom that they work in, and they had to build a sequence of questions for that lesson. And just by building the specific questioning sequence, they could automatically see how much deeper the learning would go than maybe the questions that they would normally asked in the classroom. So just a few examples of how impactful this learning has been for some of our classified employees, and I can't wait to see the impact that it has on our students in the fall. So we are looking very much forward to our July portion of the Engage Conference and really getting prepared to walk into the 22-23 school year. But that's everything that I had to share with you this evening. Any questions before I step away?
Thank you. Item 4, item regarding screening of future meetings.
Yes, and I believe our legal representation, Mr. Jeff Goodson, has some updates regarding the live streaming.
Not to my knowledge. I don't have any updates about it.
Okay.
My understanding is that, and thank you, my understanding is that there's been some information provided to the board previously about potential costs. I think maybe even there was some amount of $50,000 or so that was mentioned, in addition to some recurring expenses each time there's live streaming. And tonight is an opportunity for the board to receive additional information about the live streaming process and ask questions that obtain more information that you might need prior to any consideration of implementing that.
My understanding, a board member or some board members wanted to discuss this or possibly pursue it.
I had one question. What would live stream bring to the meeting? And is this a requirement according to law, or is it just something that somebody?
Mr. Gall, it's not a requirement according to law.
Just while we're making comments, just the additional costs, being thrown around, I don't see having it. I mean, we have open discussions, public participation. It might cut down on public participation. They might enjoy it so much on TV, they won't want to come here and express their feelings. But like you said, it's just basically a time for discussion, I understand. If there is no
Producing
discussion.
more information about it, not to deliberate or to debate whether it is to have it or not, because it's not a voting session.
Now, the $50,000, is that per session or a year? The cost that you quoted?
Mr.
I'm
Johnson.
not certain, I believe we have someone who can clarify.
David or I can answer any questions. So no, the 50,000 was what David's team believes for one-time startup costs in our ability, some upgrades as far as microphones, camera equipment, some of the audio-visual pieces that we'll need to ensure that we have what we need to be able to stream. There's also some minor technology pieces we would have to order as far as a new. David, you're probably better at this part than me. Yeah. We'll let David answer those questions.
When you review what has to be done and what gets done currently, the way the room is currently set up, it would have to be completely torn apart and redone properly to prepare for that. Probably moving the board to a better location to where we can add additional screens and things and cameras. When you look at those overall costs, there's a one-time cost, but then there's an additional recurring cost. As I understand, the law does require us to do closed captioning of some kind, and that's an additional recurring cost that
The recurring cost would be, and it depends, the market fluctuates, but when I did the research back in October and I spent some time with Skip Burchett at the Montgomery County commission who does all of their live streaming. Of course, I had indicated to you all before what they have. I don't know that necessarily this board is looking to get where you have cameras on every person. I don't know that you want to go that way. We can certainly, if you go that way, we can provide you with that information. We kind of quoted more of just the base model, if you will. And so essentially those recurring costs are for us to be able to do live closed captioning, which would be something that would be very important from the Office of Civil Rights for accessibility for our families. And so that is something that I think would be a non-negotiable that we would need to be able to provide as live closed captioning. But we're looking at potentially anywhere from 100 to 180 per meeting. And so 2 meetings per month, you're looking at, a couple thousand per year for that type of service.
Or is there something that Esther was gonna, could be funded through there?
For the initial startup costs, we believe that we have an FCC grant that would allow us to be able to use those funds for the initial startup. The recurring cost would be something that we would need to talk to Chris about adding to the budget. But again, it's a couple thousand, and I think I'll defer to Chris, but probably some sort of amendment would need to be made to make that happen.
Is this becoming a trend across Tennessee school boards?
To be honest with you, I don't know any other large districts that are not live streaming right now. So Williamson County, Metro Nashville, Shelby County, I believe some areas, most all of them are streaming at this point, most of the large ones, yes ma'am.
I think basically this was put on the agenda tonight just to discuss, which is what we're doing. But until we get a lot more information, I don't, unless someone just objects, I don't see putting it on our informal session to vote on yet until we get a lot more information. Does everyone feel the same way, or?
I feel like we've got the information they provide us with the cost. I feel like we'll go ahead and have it on our agenda the next meeting.
No problem.
I disagree.
Understanding which vehicle would you be using? Would it be like Zoom or Teams or?
Well, the county uses YouTube, and the great thing about that is we can use YouTube for free, so that wouldn't be a cost. And we already have the CMCSS focus channel, so it'd be a pretty easy implementation for using YouTube. The cart services or the closed captioning is something we could kind of shop around for. The one that the county uses, I thought from what they told me was probably the most reasonable cost for that. But to answer your question, YouTube is what we would be looking at. Plus, to be honest, for our stakeholders, for the community, YouTube's a lot easier to get to and access. Most people know how to get to YouTube, so that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. And if this would be the right time, it's been brought to my attention that several board members, as far as moving public participation to the end of the agenda instead of the very beginning. Again, just throwing it out for discussion. Some reason was, starting off our meeting in a lot of ways in a negative way instead of a positive way, and I think most of us are positive people. But just want to throw that out there, and we might pursue that later. Open for any comments on that. I can tell everybody's really excited. Okay, moving on. County Commissioner's not here tonight, and board members, any comments from the board members before we turn it over to the director? No comments from the board
I
members?
just wanted
Yes,
to
ma'am.
welcome Dr. Lillibetter back to CMCSS. I know you've been a Montgomery County resident for 15 years, so not long enough to get the Southern draw, but long enough to want to return to us and to appreciate the system, and happy to have you back.
Thank you. Any other board members? Dr. Lillibetter?
I just want to publicly thank the school board members for giving me the opportunity to return to CMCSS. I know this is just my first day back, but already just so excited to see everyone, talk to everyone, and you have my commitment that I am here to work collaboratively with all of you, the amazing administrators, leadership team, the great educators that we have, and staff members, along with community parents, students, to make this and continue to be the best school system
to work and attend in the state of Tennessee. So thank you all.
Thank you. We are adjourned.